Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to Soul Stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to join our family. Stay with us, because a new love story is about to begin. The saloon doors swung behind me as I steadied Mr. Harrison against my shoulder, his weight heavy and his words slurred beyond recognition. The moon hung low over Dusty Creek, casting silver light across the empty main street as I guided my drunk boss toward the wagon I'd hitched outside. My name is Samuel Cole, and I'd been working at Harrison's cattle ranch for 3 years. At 26, I had nothing to my name except my horse, my saddle, and the wages Mr. Harrison paid me every month. Tonight, like many nights before, he'd drowned himself in whiskey at the Silver Spurs Saloon, and like always, I was the one who made sure he got home safe. I lifted him into the wagon bed, arranging some hay beneath his head before climbing onto the driver's seat and clicking my tongue at the horses. The ride to the Harrison ranch took about 30 minutes, and I spent every moment of it wondering how a man with so much could be so determined to destroy himself. George Harrison owned the largest cattle operation in the territory. He had money, land, respect from the townspeople, and a wife that most men would consider themselves blessed to have. Yet every week, sometimes more, he found himself at the bottom of a bottle, speaking bitterly about regrets I never fully understood. The ranch house appeared in the distance, warm light glowing from the downstairs windows. My heart did what it always did when I saw that light. It quickened, jumped, behaved in ways that brought me nothing but shame, because I knew who was waiting behind those windows, and I knew that the thoughts I carried about her were the worst kind of betrayal. Eleanor Harrison stepped onto the porch as I pulled the wagon up to the house. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair braided loosely over one shoulder, and even in the dim light, I could see the exhaustion in her beautiful face. She was 30 years old, married to George for 8 years, and in all that time, she'd never borne him children. The town whispered about it. George drank because of it, and Eleanor carried the weight of that failure in her shoulders every single day. I climbed down from the wagon and removed my hat. Mrs. Harrison, he's in the back, had a bit too much again. She nodded slowly, her expression unchanged. She'd stopped crying over this years ago. Now there was only resignation, a quiet acceptance that this was her life, and would remain so until death parted them. "Help me get him inside, Samuel." Her voice was soft, gentle like spring rain. I'd heard it in my dreams more times than I cared to admit. Together, we managed to get George into the house and up to the bedroom. He collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, and Eleanor removed his boots with practiced efficiency while I stood awkwardly in the doorway, trying not to notice the intimacy of the scene, trying not to imagine myself in his place. She covered him with a quilt and stood there for a moment, looking down at the man she'd married. I saw something flicker across her face. Not hatred, not love, but something in between, something tired and complicated. When she turned and walked past me, she whispered, "Come downstairs. I'll make you coffee before you ride back." I should have refused. Every time she offered, I should have refused. But I never did. Those stolen moments in her kitchen, sharing coffee and quiet conversation while her husband slept off his sins upstairs, were the closest thing to heaven I'd ever known. The kitchen was warm from the stove, and Eleanor moved with graceful purpose, preparing the coffee with hands that never trembled despite everything she endured. I sat at the small table, turning my hat in my hands, watching her while pretending not to. She was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with her face, though her face was lovely enough to stop a man's heart. It was her strength that drew me, her kindness, the way she never spoke ill of George despite having every reason to. She treated every ranch hand with dignity, remembered our names, asked about our families. She had once nursed me through a fever when I'd been too sick to ride back to the bunkhouse. She'd sat beside my bed for 2 days, pressing cool cloths to my forehead and spooning broth past my lips. That was when I'd fallen in love with her. 3 years ago, and every day since had been a beautiful torture. She set the coffee in front of me and took the seat across the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time that seemed to stretch and contract in her presence. "He wasn't always like this," she said finally, her eyes fixed on some distant point. "When we first married, he was different, hopeful. He wanted children so badly, Samuel, a son to inherit the ranch, a daughter to spoil. When year after year passed with nothing, something in him broke. I didn't know what to say. I never did when she spoke of such personal matters. It felt wrong to be her confidant, wrong that I knew things about her marriage that made me ache with longing. "It's not your fault," I said quietly. "Children come when they come. Some couples just aren't meant to have them." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "The doctor told me something last month, something I haven't told George yet." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "The problem isn't me, Samuel, it's him. He's the one who can't have children. He's been blaming me all these years, and it was never my failing at all." The revelation hung in the air between us. I watched her struggle with emotions I couldn't fully comprehend. 8 years of believing herself barren, 8 years of enduring his drinking and his silent accusations, and all along the truth had been different. "You have to tell him," I said. "I know." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But I'm afraid of what it will do to him. He's already so fragile, Samuel. If he learns the truth, I fear he'll shatter completely." I reached across the table without thinking and covered her hand with mine. It was wrong. It was inappropriate. It was the most natural thing I'd ever done. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around mine, and she held on like I was the only steady thing in her world. "You're too good, Samuel Cole," she whispered. "Too good to spend your life working for a man who doesn't appreciate you. Too good to waste your nights bringing him home from saloons. Why do you stay?" I could have lied. I could have spoken of wages and opportunity. Instead, the truth came spilling out before I could stop it. "You know why I stay." Her breath caught. Her hand tightened around mine. And in her eyes, I saw recognition. She'd always known. Of course she had. Women like Eleanor saw everything. "Samuel, I know," I said, my voice rough. "I know it's wrong. I know you're his wife, and I'm just a ranch hand, and I have no right to feel what I feel. But you asked me why I stay, and I can't lie to you. I've tried. God knows I've tried to feel nothing when I see you. But every time you smile at me, you say my name, every time you show me kindness I don't deserve, I fall a little deeper into something I'll never climb out of." She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks, and I hated myself for causing them. I stood abruptly, releasing her hand, grabbing my hat from the table. "I should go. I shouldn't have said anything. I'll understand if you want me gone from the ranch by morning." I made it to the kitchen door before her voice stopped me. "Wait." I stopped but didn't turn. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I'd break apart. "Samuel, please, look at me." Slowly I turned. She had risen from her chair and stood in the middle of the kitchen, her hands clasped at her heart, her face wet with tears. "Do you think I don't feel it too?" she asked. "Do you think I don't lie awake at night, thinking about you in that bunkhouse, wishing things were different? Every time you bring him home, every time you sit in this kitchen with me, I feel like I'm coming alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. You see me, Samuel, not the barren wife, not the woman who failed, just me." I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. The distance between us felt impossible to cross, yet somehow my feet were moving, carrying me toward her. "Eleanor." I breathed her name like a prayer. "We can't," she said, even as she stepped closer. "I made vows. I stood before God and promised to honor them. I know it would destroy everything. The ranch, the life I've built, Whatever's left of my reputation. I know George would ruin you. He'd make sure you never worked anywhere in the territory again. I know. We stood inches apart now. I could smell the lavender in her hair, could count the tears on her cheeks, could feel the heat of her body reaching toward mine. I have loved you for 3 years, I told her. I will go on loving you whether anything happens between us or not. So whatever you decide, Eleanor, decide it for yourself. Don't think about me. Don't think about what's proper or expected. Think about what you want, what you truly want. She was quiet for a long time. The clock ticked. Upstairs, George snored loudly, oblivious to the earthquake happening in his kitchen. What I want, she finally said, is a chance to live, really live, not just exist in the shadow of someone else's expectations. George stopped loving me years ago. Maybe he never truly did. He loved the idea of me, the children I would give him, the dynasty we would build. When those dreams died, so did whatever feeling he had for me. I've been alone in this marriage for so long, Samuel, so terribly alone. I lifted my hand and gently brushed the tears from her cheek. She leaned into my touch like a flower turning towards sun. Run away with me, I said. The words surprised even me, but once spoken, I knew I meant them with every fiber of my being. I don't have much, but I have enough for 2 train tickets to California. We could start over, build something new, together. He'd come after us. He'd never let me go. Then we'll go somewhere he'll never find us. I don't care if we end up in a 1-room cabin in the mountains. I don't care if I have to dig ditches and herd other men's cattle for the rest of my life. Eleanor, I would live in poverty with you before I'd live in wealth without you. She laughed through her tears, a sound that filled the kitchen with light. You mean it. You actually mean it. I've never meant anything more. She rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to mine. The kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of salt and coffee and possibility. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining with something I'd never seen in them before. Hope, give me 3 days, she said. I need to settle things here. Tell George the truth about the doctor's findings. He deserves at least that before I leave. And I need to gather some things, practical things for the journey. 3 days, I agreed. I'll have everything ready. We'll leave at midnight on the 3rd night. I'll wait for you at the old oak tree by the river crossing. She kissed me again, longer this time, deeper. When we finally separated, I felt like a new man. Like every dark thing I'd ever felt had been washed clean. I left the Harrison Ranch that night walking on air. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went about my duties as usual, careful not to draw attention, careful not to look at Eleanor any differently when George was around. But in quiet moments, when our eyes met across the dinner table or the cattle yard, I saw the same fierce joy burning in her that burned in me. On the 2nd night, George got drunk again. This time he didn't make it to the saloon. He passed out in his study, bottle in hand. I found Eleanor in the garden behind the house, standing among her roses, looking up at the stars. Did you tell him, I asked? She nodded. He didn't believe me, said I was making excuses, trying to shift blame. He got angrier than I've ever seen him, Samuel. Then he started drinking. She paused. I'm not sad anymore. I thought I would be, but all I feel is free. I took her in my arms and held her there among the roses, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. Tomorrow night, we would ride away from all of this. Tomorrow night, our new life would begin. The 3rd night arrived with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. I had the horses saddled and waiting at the old oak tree, supplies packed for the long journey. I watched the moon disappear behind the clouds and prayed Eleanor would make it safely. When I finally heard hoofbeats approaching, my heart nearly burst with relief. But as the rider came into view, I realized it wasn't Eleanor. It was one of the other ranch hands, a young kid named Timothy who ran errands and delivered messages. Samuel, he panted, pulling his horse to a stop. You have to come quick. There's been an accident. My blood turned to ice. What kind of accident? Mr. Harrison. He was drinking in his study, knocked over a lantern. The whole east wing went up in flames. Mrs. Harrison got him out, but she went back in for something. Some kind of box she said was important. Samuel, part of the roof collapsed. She's hurt bad. I didn't wait for him to finish. I kicked my horse into the fastest gallop of my life, tearing through the darkness toward the ranch. When I arrived, I saw the damage immediately. Half the house was blackened and smoldering. Neighbors and ranch hands were throwing water on the remaining embers. I found Eleanor lying on a blanket near the barn, the ranch's doctor kneeling beside her. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, and her right leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. But when she saw me, she smiled. "Samuel," she whispered, "I'm sorry, I ruined everything." I dropped to my knees beside her, taking her hand in mine. "Don't you dare apologize, just hold on. The doctor's going to fix you up." The doctor looked at me with grim eyes. "The leg's badly broken. It'll take months to heal. She won't be going anywhere for a long time." George Harrison appeared then, standing over us with a strange expression on his face. He was sober for the first time in days, the shock of the fire having cleared his head. He looked from Eleanor to me, and understanding slowly dawned in his eyes. "You love her," he said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact. I met his gaze without flinching. "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, to my astonishment, his shoulders sagged and tears began streaming down his face. "Take care of her," he said. "I've done nothing but hurt her. The drinking, the blame, the coldness. She deserves better than me. She always has." Over the following months, everything changed. George filed for divorce, something nearly unheard of in our territory, citing his own failures as a husband. He gave Eleanor a generous settlement and the blessing to live her life as she chose. Then he sold the ranch and moved east, seeking treatment for his drinking at a facility his family had found. Eleanor healed slowly, but she healed completely. By spring, she could walk again. By summer, she could dance. We were married on a September morning, beneath the old oak tree where I'd once waited for her. The ceremony was small, just a few friends and the preacher from town, but it was everything we'd ever wanted. That night, lying beside my wife for the first time, I thought about all the roads that had led us here. Every night I'd driven my drunk boss home, every cup of coffee shared in that kitchen, every moment of longing and restraint and impossible hope. Eleanor turned in my arms and pressed a kiss to my chest, right over my heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For seeing me, for waiting, for loving me when loving me was impossible." I pulled her closer and watched the moonlight dance across her face. Outside, the prairie stretched endless and free, full of possibility. It was never impossible, I told her. It was only ever a matter of time, and in the years that followed, we built the life we dreamed of together, a small homestead of our own, cattle enough to live comfortably, and though children never came, we filled our home with love so abundant that it overflowed into everything we touched. Some nights I still think about those dark rides home from the saloon, steadying a broken man while loving his wife from a distance. I think about how close I came to leaving, how many times I almost gave up hope, and I thank whatever force guides our lives that I stayed long enough to find my way to her. Because Eleanor taught me that love isn't always convenient or proper or easy. Sometimes it grows in the most unexpected places. Sometimes it survives the longest nights. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and brave enough, it becomes everything you never dared to wish for.